Hi there, I'm Georgie Ainslie, and every week I talk to someone who is a performance person. They could be an athlete from the world of entertainment, business, or politics. They could even be an astronaut. The key link is, of course, that they all know how to perform at the top level, and they can teach us all a thing or two about how to do that in our own lives, at whatever it is that we do. Performance People is available wherever you get your podcasts, or of course you can watch us on YouTube, where you can also subscribe, and please do. John McAvoy is a Nike athlete. He was previously a high-profile armed robber who found redemption through the power of sport. Having broken both British and world rowing records whilst in prison, he's now forging a new life as an endurance athlete and speaker, committed to using his story of rehabilitation to help and inspire others to change their lives for the better.
It really took me from the darkness into the light, and it's given me a positive life and a positive outlook on life, and sport saved my life. It really, really did save my life.
You know what? That's the thing about second chances, isn't it? You must feel like you've been given the biggest second chance going. But how important it is for everyone else also to recognise that in other people and to give the second chances as opposed to be given them.
To me, that's going to be my greatest achievement in life. That really will. That will be a legacy for me. It will be the fact that I've interacted with someone and made their life better. I can't tell you and I can't explain to you enough how much that man changed my life. Within 18 months, I set 3 world records and 8 British records on the rowing machine.
So, John, when I was Googling you ahead of this conversation, I stumbled across your website, as obviously I would, and there's a button on your nav bar which says redemption. Well, that struck me as, fascinating just to begin with, because I don't think many people will have those. Just tell me why that's there, why it matters, and what that word means to you, because I think without explaining that, we can't explain how you are where you are today.
Yeah, the word redemption and the button on my website, it comes from a point of my life where, when I was younger, my life was really an absolute mess. It was a misspent youth, a wasted youth. I spent 10 years of my younger life entombed, incarcerated, and sport, physical activity, a mentorship of an incredible prison officer changed my life. And I can only say it really took me from the darkness into the light, and it's given me a positive life and a positive outlook on life, and sport saved my life. It really, really did save my life.
So when you were younger and you made those bad decisions, what were they? Why were you where you ended up being, like you say, incarcerated for this sort of 10-year period and so much of your youth spent, inside the walls of a prison? Why did that happen? How did that happen?
So, Georgie, I have to really go back to before I was born. So when my mum was 8 months pregnant with me, my biological dad died at 38 of a massive heart attack. So then when I was born into this world, I didn't have a parental father figure. And I had the most loving childhood that a child could have. I was brought up by my mum, my sister, my mum's sisters, all my aunties. And I have not got one bad memory from being a child. I was so loved. But when I started going to primary school, I thought it was normal not to have a dad. And children used to start teasing me, and I got upset one day and I went home and I asked my mum where my dad was. And my mum explained to me that my dad had passed away before I was born. So from a very young age, I understood that I wasn't going to live forever. And this lit something up inside of me as a child where I wanted to achieve something when I was an adult. I developed this real interest and fascination in history. And I used to read these books and magazines when I was a child on people that had lived hundreds of years before me and they had achieved something in their lives. And this had a profound impact over me, and the fact that I wanted my life to have a meaning and a significance. And then as I got a little bit older, I sort of attached that significance to wealth. I grew up in the era of Margaret Thatcher, and I remember watching the news and everything was about money and the I and the self. And when I was 8 years old, my mum, when she was much younger, was married to a man called Billy Tobin. And Billy got released from prison when I was 8 years old. He just finished serving 16 years for armed robbery, and he was one of the most prolific armed robbers in the United Kingdom. He had 5 acquittals at the Old Bailey. He was a multi-millionaire when he was 21 years old. And he come into my life, not to have a relationship with my mum, because my actual sister was his biological daughter, but I didn't know that at the time. But I remember the first time I met him, I was just in awe of this man, and he never had a son, and I never had a dad, and we kind of got drawn to each other. And when he used to take my sister out on the weekends, he started taking me out, and then he stopped taking my sister out, but he continued to take me out, and kind of he exposed me to this whole world of organised crime. And I was too young to really understand that a lot of these men and adults that I was associating with as a really young kid were organised criminals. But obviously, being a kid when you're around grown adult men and they're very carefree, they hate the system, they're very affluent, all the things that I wanted when I was older in regards of wealth, these men had it, and then it became an attainable path. And then when I was 12 years old, I watched a film on ITV, on Channel 3, and it was a film about my uncle. And my biological uncle committed the biggest armed robbery in the world, and he stole £26 million worth of gold bullion from Heathrow Airport. And that really impacted me when I watched that film, because, again, as a young kid, it's all very exciting, and I didn't see the downside, like the fact that my uncle was in prison serving 25 years. And I just saw Sean Bean in a film playing my uncle, and all these men that are in my life in reality right now were all being played in this film. And it massively directed me into becoming a criminal, and that whole world of organised crime become completely normalised to me. And there was no other life. That was the life that I was going to lead. I was going to lead the life of the people that were around me, and that was the life I chose to lead.
Yeah, it glamorized it, right? That glamorized it for you.
Yeah, most definitely. Like, I always accept full responsibility for my actions. Like, no one ever made me do anything I never wanted to do. But when you are in that world and it becomes so normal to you, that is life. Like, you don't see another life. Like, when I was a kid, I had no interest in sport as a child. I, I love learning. I love going to school. Like I said, I loved history. But as I grew older, that love of education started kind of sort of fell away a little bit. And in that whole world of organised crime, like hanging out with people that were kind of, yeah, just normalizing it to me, and to a degree, kind of encouraging it. And as a young boy, as a young man, it is very intoxicating and very exciting when you're around adults that are kind of glorifying that world. And even though my mum did everything she could to pull me away from it, like, my stepdad had an apartment on the Champs-Elysees in Paris, and he's driving £100,000 car, a Porsche 911. But my mum's working in a florist making minimum wage, and my mum's telling me that crime doesn't pay. But I'm seeing the complete opposite. And when I was at secondary school, like, I can remember police officers used to come in, and they used to come in with like a suitcase, and they'd open it up and they say, if you commit crime and sell drugs, you're going to go to prison and you'll get a criminal record. But then the people that I'm going home to every night are all sort of incredibly affluent and wealthy through committing crime. And I'm not seeing what they're telling me is going to happen to me, to a degree.
So what happened? What landed you behind bars for that length of time?
So when I was 22 years old, I got arrested for conspiracy to commit robbery. And I was held in the HSU in Belmarsh prison. So it's a high security unit. The Metropolitan Police believed that I was a very high escape risk, that someone was going to help break me out of prison. So I was held in this high security unit in prison. So it's a prison within a prison. When I was in there, the 21/7 suicide bombers were in there, and Sheikh Abu Hamza was fighting extradition to the US. So that was the level where the police thought I was going to try to break out, and I would have done, like, if I'd have had the opportunity, because I grew up with this tremendous hatred towards the system. It's very hard for me to verbalize it now because my life is so different, and I haven't got that hate in my heart anymore. But I grew up detesting the system and hating it, and I thought it was so rancid and corrupt. So then when I was in prison, because of the way I was, and the police believed other people would have helped me get out of prison, they held me in this sort of maximum security environment. And I went through a process of, I was reading books every day. I was exercising, and kind of this is where my journey of exercise began. Like, I started doing cell circuits, and I would do thousands of repetitions of each exercise. And like I said, when I was a kid, I had no interest in sport. But when I was in prison, that exercise in that cell, being locked up for 23 and a half hours a day, it made me feel like I was a human being, and it made me feel alive. And also, again, Georgie, like, I think back now, like, what motivated me in that cell has led to the life I've got today to a degree. But it was fueled by hatred. Like, I wasn't training in that cell to get fit to become an athlete. I was training because it was more defiance towards the system. Like, you can take everything off me, but you cannot control my body, and you can't stop me from doing this. And little did I know that I had this ability locked in my body that I didn't know I had. And by doing those cell circuits at the beginning, it was setting the foundations for the life I've got today.
And sometimes there's this most extraordinary thing that happens, but you meet people who do completely change your life. And fortunately for you, you were incarcerated with this wonderful prison officer, Darren, weren't you? Who really saw the potential in you and wanted to help you get to this new chapter, this fresh chapter of your life, the next stage of your life. So how did that sort of manifest itself? Because we just don't hear those sorts of stories very often.
Yeah, so basically, I was like 6 years into the sentence that I was serving. I didn't want to change. I didn't want to rehabilitate, because I was brought up to believe that if you changed, that you was weak and the system had broken you. And that was pushed into me as a kid. Like, you never surrender, you never quit. And to me, changing was quitting. It was the system had broken me and made me become something else. It took the death of my friend on the 14th of November in 2009. He died in a car crash committing a robbery in the Netherlands. And it was a profound moment in my life where I'd lost someone that I deeply loved and cared for. And I'd never experienced this before. Like, I'd known other people to die, but I'd never had that bond and that connection to to these people. But with my friend Aaron that died, I deeply loved him, and it affected me massively. And it was one of the very few times I can actually remember crying. And I was completely lost, because I knew from that night when my mate died, I'd never commit a crime in my life again. I looked at my own life, and from that little kid that was growing up, that was ambitious, that wanted to do something with his life, I was just literally rotting in a cage. And I looked how pathetic it was. Like, all of these people that I looked up to as a kid were old men or dead. And I wanted something else for my life, but I genuinely didn't know what that thing could be. And the next morning, I went down into the communal eating area in the prison eating area where the prisoners had breakfast. And I just remember listening to inmates talking about when they got out, they were going to do this and do that. And I just thought, I cannot be around these people anymore. I have to get away from them. And I went down the prison gym, and there was a prisoner on an indoor rowing machine called Mickey. And Mickey was a little bit overweight, but he had gym every single day. And in prison, you don't get gym every single day. You only get like 3 sessions a week. But he had a special note because he was rowing 1,000,000 meters for a children's charity. And he said, if you ask if you can do it, they'll let you come down and you can get as much gym as you want. So I asked the prison officer, Craig, that run the prison gym, and he agreed to it. He said, as long as you get some sponsorship money, you can come down and you can do what Mickey's doing. And I just started rowing. And the first session I did was 32 kilometers. It was 20 miles. And it literally transcended me out of prison. Like, it was like I created a portal that took me outside of that wall. And the endorphins, well, I didn't know these words. The exercise to that degree never sort of resonated with me. But when I was on that rowing machine, it was like the rowing machine become an extension of my body. And I went down the next day and rode another 20 miles and another 20 miles and another 20 miles. And I rode the first 1,000,000 meters in a month. And I thought, this is amazing. I'm going to keep doing this, and it's going to get me to the end of my sentence. And then when I rode to 4 million, the prisoner said to me, you do realise if you do 5, that's equivalent to rowing across the Atlantic on an indoor rowing machine. And I thought it was quite a cool thing to say that I'd done. And then I don't know what you can class this as now, if it was destiny or fate. But one day I did 10 kilometers as hard as I could. And I knew, Georgie, in prison I was fit. Like, I was in this bubble, and I knew in that bubble that, like, I was the fittest prisoner in that prison. And I knew within the prison system I had a reputation for being, like, really fit and really strong. But I didn't really understand, again, what an athlete was, because I had no interest in sport. But I just knew in there I was physically better than everyone else. And when I rode this 10K, Darren Davis walked behind me, this prison officer, just as the 10K had finished and the monitor froze. And he looked over my shoulder and went, wow, that is super fast. And I knew it was quick because I was in regards of other prisoners, but I didn't realise how quick. And then he went away and he got all of the British and world indoor rowing records on an indoor rowing machine, and he gave them to me the next day. And I went back to my cell and I looked at them and I thought, they can't be real. Like, they can't be real, because I could already nearly break some of them at that moment. And then I had this idea, and I thought maybe the prison will let me try to break some of these records. And Darren went to the prison governor, and he said, I think if you allow John McAvoy the opportunity to do this, this will change his life and it will set him on the right path. And the governor of the prison was a very Christian, religious man, and he agreed to it. And Darren sat with me when I attempted to break my first ever record for the marathon, and I broke it by 7 minutes. And I remember being on the gym mat in the prison gym floor. And when I broke that record, that marathon, and I set the new British record, everything I'd ever wanted as a kid, to be good at something and to be successful, I felt it at that moment when I just accomplished what I did on that machine. And Darren went to me, you have an ability, not that you're fit, but you can suffer. And he went, if you come back to prison, it's the biggest travesty I've ever seen as a prison officer. I can't tell you, and I can't explain to you enough how much that man changed my life. Within 18 months, I set 3 world records and 8 British records on the rowing machine. He used to come in on his days off from work and sit with me to coach me, to support me. And he become like a father figure to me.
Yeah.
It was the most incredible thing, because he genuinely wanted the best for me in a positive way. And there was no endorsement deals. There was no accolades in it for him. He just saw something in me, and he supported me, and he helped me, and he changed my life. And I will forever be grateful for him. And he's become a dear friend of mine to this day.
Isn't that refreshing to hear that version of an event, given where you've been and what you've had to go through to get here? One of the things that I think is really interesting that you talked about before, that you think that prison might have given you, is the ability to tolerate boredom. And I think that's really interesting as well, isn't it? Because an endurance athlete needs to know how to do that really, really well, because the amount of training that goes into what they try and hope to accomplish and achieve requires you to really understand how to deal with boredom and repetition. Is that something that you really recognize as something that you've almost subconsciously been able to train yourself to do before you even found that you had the physical ability? You realized you actually mentally were right for this?